Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 206, cover dated June 1986. So a cover here featuring the Blob, now of Freedom Force, and we've got various X-Men here that he looks like he's defeated: Rachel, Phoenix and Rogue, but we've got Colossus popping up underneath him. And you'd hardly guess it, but this actually happens to be Kitty Pryde here after undergoing something of a makeover in the interior of the comic. So covered by John Romita Jr. and Al Williamson. Let's open this one up to the splash page. So we have here Storm in silhouette, and we've got some Chinese ideograms here. It turns out we're still in San Francisco. Picking up from issues 202 and 203. And so this is Chinatown, San Francisco. And the title of the story is Freedom is a Four-Letter Word. Creative team: Chris Claremont writer, John Romita Jr. and Dan Green artists. So Romita Jr. providing breakdowns, and Dan Green finishes. Glynis Oliver colorist, Tom Orzechowski letterer, and Ann Nocenti editor. And here they've put Jim Shooter's name on the bin. So let's open this one up. And Storm is interrupting a mugging, and of course there's some tough talk from the gang members here, and they run at Storm. One of them even has nunchucks, and she fights them in the alleyway, and she fights them smart because of course she doesn't have her powers. And I like the way that Claremont has left the art to do the talking here. And here she KOs two gang members at once with this 2x4 of wood, and then she takes this big hulking brute out as well with a bonk right on the head. And just at that moment the police arrive, and the officer who talks to Storm introduces herself as Lt Bree Morrel, and she's one of the supporting cast characters from Jessica Drew's Spider-Woman comic, the cancelled Spider-Woman comic. And instead of arresting Storm, she says that she doesn't care what the world says about mutants, and especially you X-Men. You've proven yourselves to me. I'm glad you're around. I hope you'll stay in San Francisco. And Storm introduces herself by her code name, and as she walks off says perhaps the X-Men will stay in San Francisco. So we'll have to see how that might look in the course of this comic. So we switch scenes to the crest of Corona Heights, where private investigators Jessica Drew and Lindsay McCabe share a very old, very elegant Queen Anne row house in a neighborhood that's reputed to be well and truly haunted, hence the for sale signs on the neighbor houses. And then we have a little kind of domestic scene. Chris Claremont always did love these of the X-Men just living ordinary lives in this house. So it turns out that Kitty's gotten herself ready for a date, hence the big hair and hairspray. No doubt it is the mid-80s. And who's taking her out on this night out except for Jessica Drew's ex-boyfriend, David Ishima. So another one of these supporting characters from the cancelled Spider-Woman comic. And as Kitty heads off to a Lila Cheney concert, Storm thinks, if my hair were not already silver, that child would turn it silver, yes. And then we've got Lindsay McCabe, who is Jessica Drew's housemate, doing the washing up after dinner. So again, just very domestic stuff. And Rachel using her psi powers, specifically her TK powers, her telekinetic powers, to bring the cutlery and Delftware to the sink. But just as she's doing so, we have this interesting little moment with Rogue reading a postcard that, as she says, we got a postcard from Cyclops with a really ancient postmark. So Cyclops and Madelyne prior left for Alaska at the end of Uncanny X-Men 201. And in the meantime, X Factor number 1 has come out, number 2 too. And Madelyne was last seen in X Factor number 1. So, when they left the X-Mansion, there was tension between her and Scott, but we see a happy family snap here on the cover of their postcard. And this particular kind of idyllic family snap, Claremont in 2019 in a backup story to The Exterminated one-shot actually deals with the aftermath of 201, Madelyne and Scott's arrival in Alaska, and the setup for this genuinely happy family scene. So interesting to note that, many years later, decades later, we actually do get the explanation of how you could go from the end of 201 to this snap here. And then Rogue suggests that, she reads rather that Madelyne suggests, since the X-Men are on the West Coast, that we zip north to Alaska for a visit. And she asks the X-Men what do they all say. And Rachel, of course, is flabbergasted at the prospect because she feels it's too soon, that she can't face Scott yet, who is her father. As she thinks there, I'm not ready to meet my father. So she loses concentration over the dishes and they fall crashing to the ground, and she blames Rogue for this. But Rogue basically says to her that you can't keep running and hiding. You're living a lie, Ray, and it's tearing you apart. You have to tell Scott who you are and where you come from. And she makes the point that back in X-Men 203, she faced her own demons, that she came to terms with what she'd done to Carol Danvers, and she accepted that there's a part of her that'll always be part of me, Rogue. So Rachel is going to have to tell Scott that she is his daughter from another timeline. So then we switch to this scene aboard TWA flight, transatlantic flight, flying from London to Los Angeles. And Amanda Sefton, Nightcrawler's girlfriend, is aboard, doing her job as a flight stewardess. And she's thinking about her relationship with Nightcrawler and how she called him for a week over the phone, but he never picked up. And so she's a bit emotional about that. And her colleague on the plane says to her, the creep better be worth it. And she replies, once upon a time, he was. So what is to become of their relationship? And the very next time that we see Amanda Sefton in Uncanny X-Men won't be for quite some time, won't be for a few years. Uncanny X-Men 253, a video of which is available on the channel. So then we go back to San Francisco, and it's a foggy night in San Francisco, and Kitty and David are returning from the concert, and then something unexpected happens. So everything's been quiet so far, and here the ground starts bulging up and moving. So Kitty phases them through the bulge, and then the bulge, or as she puts it together, avalanche hits the house beside where the X-Men are staying, and then the X-Men emerge, alerted to danger by the noise of the crash, and they're caught in this web, and the web happens to be one created by Spider-Woman, the new Spider-Woman, Julia Carpenter, who first appeared in Secret Wars. And her power has been enhanced by Spiral, a member at this point of Freedom Force. And so the X-Men struggle to free themselves from Spider-Woman's webs. And because the webs are sonic, there's a backlash. which she feels like as if it's a physical blow. And then Rachel, angered by the sneak attack, runs at Spiral and is blasted down by Spiral, who says, "So consumed with righteous rage, you never noticed me dancing a spell to turn your attack back on you." So Rachel didn't pause to think, and now she's knocked apparently unconscious. So here, Pyro congratulates Avalanche for the work he's done, but he says, "Good guys don't make a mess, we clean them up," because of course now these former members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, some of them, are now the quote-unquote good guys, government-sponsored federal agents. So Pyro uses his powers to whip up Flamebird, and we get his thoughts about what the experience of that. "No sensation quite like this. Flames sliding across my skin, roaring through my heart." So he's enjoying himself here, and he boasts of his powers to Storm. It's in effect a challenge. "You're the Weather Witch," he says to her, "top this." And so it seems he doesn't know anything about Storm's being depowered, which is interesting because Val Cooper knows about it. So how come she hasn't passed that information on to her team, Freedom Force? In any case, Storm thinks to take advantage of a sudden downpour, a freak downpour, and pretend that she does indeed have her powers. And then Rachel, who wasn't unconscious but is just playing possum, joins in on the pretense by lifting Storm in the air with her telekinesis. And so Pyro is taken aback and asks, Avalanche asks him what should they now do, and Pyro responds, "How the heck should I know? Mystique's the boss. We never should have attempted this caper without her." So they're on a solo run here. Mystique isn't involved. And then the Blob appears and punches out Rogue, because of course Rogue is physically the most powerful member of the team, and now she's knocked to the ground by Blob, the immovable object always, and it is quite some punch he throws. So she slams right into one of those increasingly destroyed Queen Anne row houses. Excuse me. And then we have Spiral recognizing that there's no energy around Storm. So she's twigging to the fact that Storm is merely playing a part, pretending to be a star, but not truly. Great art here on this page from John Romita Jr. and Dan Green. I like the use of ink here to suggest Spiral spinning her magic spells, and also the rendering of the rain, of course, nicely done. And so Storm is knocked from the sky as Rachel is knocked out properly by Spiral, and Kitty jumps into action to catch Storm before she falls to the ground, and she phases them both underground. So then Colossus, acting alone, uses a fire hydrant, directs the water from a fire hydrant to try and put out Pyro's flame, but he's blocked by the Blob. So kind of a theme here is that Freedom Force have seemingly been training, and they're working together and using their powers in concert with each other. So by doing so, they're getting the best of the X-Men, and indeed Avalanche also uses his powers to bury Colossus. So Freedom Force acting as a team and about to defeat the X-Men. So then Colossus fights back, coming up under the ground beneath Blob, and Rogue grabs him and flings him far over the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. And at this point, Jessica Drew arrives on the scene. It's her house that the X-Men are staying in, and she sees somebody else dressed as Spider-Woman and calling herself Spider-Woman. It's a new costume though, different from Jessica Drew's. And out of instinct, she acts as if to knock her out with a venom blast, but Jessica can't do that anymore. And then we get this statement from the new Spider-Woman that she's a federal officer. She's working with Freedom Force. She's one of the team. And at this point, Rogue decides to take on the most dangerous member of Freedom Force, who is, of course, Spiral here. And she uses her powers on Spiral, and as the narrative captions indicate, usually Rogue's personality remains dominant when she absorbs the person she touches, their psyche and physical skills. But this time is different. As Spiral drops unconscious, Rogue howls like a lost soul. And you can see that rendered in the art and inking, and even the colouring in this panel. It's a panel of disjointedness in terms of the visual imagery. And then look at this horrifying result whereby Spiral actually has her psyche in charge in Rogue's transformed 6 armed body. So she looks pretty demonic here in this panel. So Kitty goes to rescue Jessica's housemate Lindsay, and Lindsay was going after her cat. So housemate and cat are rescued, and then Spiral in Rogue's body starts taking down the rest of the X-Men, starting with Colossus. And then we have another little horrifying panel here where Spiral uses her powers to phase Kitty in place. So as the narrative captions makes plain, Kitty finds herself frozen in her tracks, her body phasing in place like an image smeared across a sheet of paper. And we can see that. Look at that here, rendered by Romita Jr. and Dan Green. Pretty interesting image and horrifying in terms of what's happening. So at this point, it looks like it's all over for the X-Men. Every one of them are down for the count. And just at the last minute, the police arrive. So what is going to happen next? Well, turns out it's Lieutenant Morrel again. And she is interrupting the fight, telling Freedom Force that she and her officers are the law and that they are in trouble. So at this point, Spiral is losing control of Rogue's body, and Rogue is reverting back to herself, and she's about to take on Spiral again. But Jessica intervenes and says, no, leave it for another time. And that's what Rogue says to Spiral. Yo, Spiral, later. That's a promise. So there's promise of a facing off between these two in the future, and indeed there will be in the future. And then we have Blob stepping up, looking very smug here in this rendering by Romita Jr. and Dan Green, where he says to Morrel, we're feds, we don't need a warrant. And she says, you are posted felons, Pyro, Avalanche, and the Blob. And he responds, we've been pardoned. Check with the White House, they'll set you straight. So she says, fine, you provide appropriate documentation and we'll proceed from there. No other way. So she's not going to move for him on this occasion. So basically, Freedom Force accept that they've lost this particular round, and Spiral phases them out of San Francisco. And basically the X-Men are left to ponder what a mess the whole business was. Storm apologizes to Morrel. Or sorry, actually, it's Kitty, I think, that says that it wasn't the X-Men's fault. And Morrel responds, the city owes you a lot. I think this is where we balance those scales a little. Get my drift, Storm. So really, Storm gets the implication when Freedom Force returns, we shall be long gone. So that's it. The X-Men won't be hanging around in San Francisco. And Rachel is left to think that she nearly died like this night, and or worse, got hauled off to prison. She couldn't have endured that. She'd have done anything to escape, even taking her own life. And if worse had come to the worst, I never would have seen Scott or Madelyne or my baby brother again. So she thinks Rogue's right, some things have to be confronted, or what's the use of living? It's past time I laid my ghost to rest. My world may be dead, but I live. I better start getting used to that by visiting Cyclops and telling him he has a grown daughter. And then, at the bottom of the page, we have, remember it's Madelyne's suggestion that the X-Men come and visit them in Alaska, and there she is on the postcard. And now we have 3 panels at the bottom of this page: San Francisco Memorial Hospital, and we've got a trauma team called out to the ambulance, and it turns out there's a woman with red hair, note the color, having suffered multiple gunshot wounds, and having lost blood and needing immediate surgery, and having no identification on her. And so she's listed as Jane Doe, and one of the emergency responders says, "We'll do our best, but I doubt she'll last the night." So who is she? Okay. And last page, scene switches to New York and Nightcrawler. So we're picking up with the last time we saw Nightcrawler at the end of Uncanny X-Men 204, and he's still with Judith Rassendell, and she is going to make her way back to the European country that she has just recently discovered she's heir to the throne, Ruritania. And so she kisses, is it an air kiss, or is there an actual kiss, kisses goodbye to Nightcrawler. And she says to Nightcrawler, this isn't a game. No matter how hard you try to make it so, how much crazier can things get? I'm the one who could be murdered at any moment, yet you're the one I feel sorry for. And he thinks to himself, in the last couple of panels, why did she say that, silly girl? I'm in my element, a beauteous damsel in distress to protect, arch-villains to hunt down, confound and trounce, well-nigh impossible odds to overcome, all by my lonesome. Sorry for me, Judith? Ridiculous. I couldn't be happier, as he pulls down the rim of his Trilby hat, and with the devilish, devil-may-care smile on his face. But is he even thinking about Amanda anymore? What is going on with Nightcrawler at this point is an open question. So the letters here deal with Uncanny X-Men 195, and there's a next issue blurb: the X-Men return to New York, and Rachel decides to single-handedly take on their deadliest foes, the Lords Cardinal, the inner circle of the Hellfire Club. So that's what's coming up in the next issue. I do hope that you enjoyed this read-through, commentary and review of Uncanny X-Men 206. If you did, please like the video, and if you haven't done so already, stay tuned to the channel and subscribe to make sure you don't miss upcoming content.